Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off because today I'll be discussing Deus Ex Machina Games' upcoming Kickstarter for Amethyst Revelations for 5e. And we'll kick things off right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. So today, something a bit different, a Kickstarter preview. And if you follow the Gaming Gang, you know that for the past year or more, I have really stayed away from doing any sort of Kickstarter previews. I'm not going to get into the long and short of it, but today I'm making an exception. And the reason I am is because I had previously provided coverage for an earlier Kickstarter from Deus Ex Machina Games, Affinity, and really liked that trio of books. I thought it was very, very cool. And Chris Diaz actually advertised that Kickstarter on thegaminggang.com. So Chris reached out, said, I've got a new Kickstarter coming. I want to share some content that's available right now for this setting. And I'd like to advertise the Kickstarter with you. And could you maybe put together a video? And I said, yes, I would, because I enjoyed Affinity so much. I figured I'll make an exception and I will take a look at Amethyst 5e and discuss it and talk a bit about what's coming in this Kickstarter. So, to be completely transparent, I am going to mark this video as being sponsored because Deus Ex Machina Games is going to be advertising the Kickstarter on thegaminggang.com. All right, so all of that out of the way. What is Amethyst 5e? And I will tell you, up until a few weeks ago, I had no idea. I was absolutely clueless. But it turns out this is a science fiction fantasy mashup. And this setting has actually been around for quite some time. In fact, I believe it was originally released for 3rd edition D&D. It has been ported over for 4th, revamped for 5th. But it has also made appearances for 13th Age as well as Pathfinder. So it has been around for a good amount of time. It's got legs to it. And I know a lot of you out there are thinking, science fiction fantasy mashup, that's not very original. I'll tell you what, this setting truly is. So rather than just watch me talking, let me share some interiors and some artwork from the books that are already out there, because there is a lot of content for Amethyst that's already available. So we've got the main core book, Quintessence, which this pretty much lays out the setting for you, gives you a bunch of new rules, as well as some new races and things like that. One of the first things I'll point out, really like the artwork throughout, it is very uniform. I will admit some of the Fey designs I'm not super keen on, but I'm one of these people. I'm not a big fan of Fey with these huge, long ears. I know, it's just me. What could I tell you? So what's going on here is that way, way back, prehistory, there existed other worlds on our world, or other realms, I guess, on our world. So we had light, darkness, and humanity. And we coexisted. But then there was a cataclysmic event, and light and darkness hibernated, went into a hibernation. So humanity was left to essentially inherit the earth. And we did. And we have legends and myths of things like dragons and elves and goblins and trolls and things like that because they actually really did exist prehistory. So Amethyst is actually the name of the first dragon. So that's where Amethyst comes from. So what happens is it's a relatively near future setting when an apocalyptic event takes place and these two realms return. And it's nearly an extinction level event. So mankind is almost wiped out. So right there, that makes this a lot different than most sci-fi fantasy mashups because it's a bit of a post-apocalyptic setting. Because science and magic really cannot coexist. Although the reality is law and chaos, we'll use those two phrases, those terms, really do have to coexist for life to flourish. You can't have utter chaos and you cannot have utter order because order leads to stagnation and chaos just leads to complete randomness. But together, they can coexist, although they don't want to, right? A la the Elric novels from Michael Moorcock, which is where law and chaos really comes from as far as our role-playing games. So this is a very, very dangerous world. So we have these last bastions of humanity, most of which are walled off because technology and science and things like that really can't exist. They have a hard time existing side by side with the chaos and randomness of fantasy and magic. So right there, you've got kind of two options. So you can have player characters who represent the forces of science, or you can have player characters who represent the forces of fantasy, which I think is very, very cool. So as far as fantasy, there aren't a ton of changes to the 5e core mechanics, but there are a lot of additional options for a multitude of classes. So you get a lot of different subclasses that you can utilize, a lot of new backgrounds as well. Now, the forces of science actually receive a lot of new rules. We have some new skills, of course, things like computer use, right? Because that's obviously not in D&D. And we also get some new classes as well for the Techon races. So you've got your fantasy races and you've got your science races. And they of course have their own titles to them as well. But very, very interesting, very, very unique. And there is just loads of content in this book. It's over 400 pages long. And there's also some fiction in here as well that kind of get you into the setting. And I'll be the first to point out, it's a lot better than what you're used to seeing in role-playing game books. Because I'll be the first to point out, 9 times out of 10, I skip right past that flavor fiction, that fluff fiction. Because a lot of times it's god awful. But here it is not. It is actually pretty interesting. There's a trio of novels that are also set in the Amethyst world. So we get the technology-based rules. We get new vehicles. We've got the new races. You're looking right now at the Kodiak, which is pretty cool. You want to play a bear? You can be a bear. We have the different Fey races. So, of course, the Fey races include elves. Of course, they're not called elves. But there are a lot of different Fey races, some of which are monstrous. So keep that in mind as well. So the Fey aren't necessarily all the forces of light. So we've got that. So a lot of options as far as creating your player characters. We'll mention that this setting, the philosophy does kind of come from the POV of the science, the Tekon characters. So it's, I don't want to say it's assumed, but it's almost baked in that the most of the player characters are probably going to be humans. Now, that does not have to be the case, but that's sort of how this core book is laid out. But wow, there is just so much in here. There's tons of gear, like over it's either, I think it's almost 40 pages of just backgrounds. You've got these subclasses that you can use for the science classes as well. So you got like snipers and medics and things like that. You've got real high-tech equipment. Now, remember I had mentioned that it's kind of a near future when this cataclysm takes place and these two realms return to Earth, but that's hundreds of years ago. It's not exactly clear in this first book of when all of this took place, but in the next book that I'm going to talk about, it does kind of clear some of that up. So we kind of get a better feel for when exactly in this setting is now supposed to be. So, but you've got new monsters. One thing that I thought was interesting as well is that we do, of course, have dragons, but some of the more subservient races, I guess I'll say, so from D&D, like goblins, kobolds, they are not in this. They are not ported over to this setting. So essentially, it's any of like the, like I said, subservient races that you would find kind of coexisting with others. So as an example, let's say goblins with orcs and hobgoblins, you're not going to find that dynamic in this. And I thought that was very interesting as well. So we've got 30 new monsters. We've got tons of gear. We've got a lot of high-tech weapons. There are, at the top of my head, I think there are 20 vehicles in here as well. And something to point out, remember I had mentioned that this fantasy world is very dangerous. Technology has a hard time coexisting. That's why these bastions of humanity mainly are walled off to keep the magic at bay, because technology kind of misfires, kind of breaks down in the presence of magic. So there are rules for high-tech equipment in the fantasy world. And I found that very interesting as well. I know a lot of people out there will be thinking, well, in Torg and Torg Eternity, you have that. You have the various different cosms. For an example, the fantasy cosm is Isle. And you'll find that high-tech equipment and even high-tech classes tend to break down. I got to be honest, those rules are kind of clunky. Not so here. The rules are pretty straightforward. And for the most part, a lot of it is a bit of Game Master fiat. Hey, you know what? This would be a really interesting time to see if that automatic rifle kind of breaks down. So there is that as well. But lots of really cool stuff in this. And as you can see, really, really solid artwork throughout. So that is Quintessence. We have another 400 plus page tome for Amethyst 5e, and that is Factions. And this actually provides a lot more detail on North and South America. So we have that. We also have the colonists from Mars. Yep. So, okay. So I had mentioned it was a kind of near future humanity that suffers this cataclysm. Well, we had colonists on Mars. And as I mentioned before, this war has been going on. This conflict's been going on for hundreds of years. I want to say, I think it's 500 years. So we now have the Mars colonists coming home. So we get like essentially a new faction who have their own motives and even more high-tech equipment like starships now. So that's also included. One of the aspects that I think is really interesting about Amethyst too is you can tweak the sci-fi to how you want it. If you want this to be kind of like Traveler meets D&D, well, go for it. If you want it to be Cyberpunk meets D&D, you can do that as well. If you want it to be not real far in the future, if you want to be more like today, and this takes place, this cataclysm takes place, you can do that also. So I don't want to say that, I don't want to say that this is modular in that respect, but like any really good role-playing game supplements, you can kind of pick and choose what you feel is going to be best for your campaign and your players. Speaking of campaigns, Factions also has a whole campaign layout to kind of put things together for you as far as, I don't want to say it's a meta plot. It's not really that, but it does kind of fill in some blanks if you want to create a campaign taking place in the world of Amethyst. So Factions is longer than Quintessence by about 30 pages. And once again, just jam-packed with content. So right there, you already have over 800 pages that exist for Amethyst 5e. There are also a trio of novels that I had mentioned, and you also have I want to say it's almost like a quick start adventure that's available as well. And Hearts of Chaos, it is available as a PDF download over on Drive-Thru RPG. I'm hoping that maybe Chris and the rest of the Deus Ex Machina Games team might make this available as a free download in this Kickstarter, because not only do you have an adventure, you also have about 25 pages of background and some of the additional rules and things like that. So this is sort of a quick start, and it really does give you a much better feel for the world of Amethyst. And once again, I'm hoping, I have no pull, so, don't look at me if this doesn't happen to be the case, but I'm hoping that maybe this will be free for the length of the Kickstarter, because I think this would be a great way for people to dip their toes into Amethyst and see, what they think as well. We'll point out the adventure that's included in this is very linear. It's a lot of set pieces, and it kind of is an homage to Apocalypse Now, amazingly enough. The horror, the horror. But it will give you a good feel for the world of Amethyst. So these are the items that are available right now that you can get your hands on. And once again, loads and loads of content. I got to say, 800 plus pages, that is a huge setting for 5e. You don't find too many third-party settings with that kind of page count. So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Kickstarter. I'll be the first to point out I have not seen really much for Revelations, the third book, but I do understand that it is going to expand the world. So in Factions, we kind of did a drill down into North and South America. Now we're going to look at Europe, Asia, places like that. So we're going to expand the world out. There are new monsters. There's going to be new backgrounds. So it's just going to expand what's available for Amethyst. I'm assuming that it is also going to kind of push the story forward a little bit as well. Not, once again, not a meta plot, but just more content. So one thing also with the 2 core books that are out right now, they do also include adventures. And I believe this third book will also have an adventure. I think this is going to be a much longer adventure than what's in the first 2 books. I think it's going to clock in around 50 pages or so. And Revelation should clock in at around 300 to 400 pages, thus bringing your total to about 1,200 pages of setting, info, and background, and gear, and vehicles, and races, player options, all of that out there for Amethyst 5e. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share the Kickstarter video with you that's going to tell you a bit more about what you can expect in this upcoming Kickstarter.
Which side will you choose? Which weapons will you wield? Venture into lands once claimed by skyscrapers and factories, now overrun by elves, goblins, and dragons. Ride gracefully on horseback, or plow through the wilderness in an armored vehicle. Earth is torn between the order of science and the chaos of fantasy. The realm of magic has invaded our world, forcing humanity into the last few bastions of technology. These worlds cannot mix. Will you embrace the wonder of legends and myths, or accept the reality of cell phones and dishwashers? For 500 years, the planet was locked in a stalemate, but no longer. The stones of Amethyst have arisen. When brought together, they could decide the planet's future, cast off the remaining shred of technology, or close off the world of magic forever. From the creator of Ultramodern 5, Affinity, Apex, and Neurospasta comes Deus Ex Machina's magnum opus, Amethyst. This crowdfunding campaign is meant to fund the 3rd volume in the series, Amethyst Revelations. Backers will be able to acquire the latest volume or all current editions of Amethyst, either as a standard or a luxury leather set. The journey begins with Amethyst Quintessence at over 400 pages, offering science fiction rules which later inspired Ultramodern 5. 11 new races, from the bear-like Kodiaks to the numerous variations of Fey. 30 backgrounds, 8 classes, over 40 pages of gear, including firearms and powered armor, over 20 new vehicles, including massive ETVs that dare to push into the hostile magical landscape. More than 30 monsters, including dragons and other intimidating creatures. The book finally concludes with an introductory adventure. Its sequel, Factions, is a mammoth 460 pages, offering expanded lore across North and South America, opening the world with new backgrounds and origins. the world of darkness is introduced, with dark spellcasters and demonic machines. Contrastively, the high-tech saints have descended from the stars, flaunting superior technology and a hidden agenda. Factions also offers powerful foundation spells, artifacts, and 50 monsters. The book also includes a campaign guide and a 50-page adventure. Amethyst Revelations will expand on the setting, adding more content to an already massive universe. Backers will also be able to acquire the Amethyst novels, Aiden's Way, Controlling Chaos, and the newest volume, Hallowed Kingdom. In total, the Amethyst role-playing game will encompass over 1,200 pages of content, one of the largest settings for 5th edition. Choose your path and commit to the quest. Monsters and machines will hunt you. No gods or prophecies will choose you. Welcome to Amethyst. Back now and support this independently published campaign.
So, has your appetite been whetted? So, pretty impressive. So, the Kickstarter itself is going to launch on August 30th in the early morning hours here in the US, or I should say here in North America. Because if I remember correctly, I think Deus Ex Machina Games is out of Canada. I might be wrong, but for some reason I think they're out of Canada. And you will have an opportunity to not only pick up the 3rd volume, Revelations, you'll also be able to get the previous 2 releases as well. The adventure, the novels, there are going to be a slew of different options for you also. So I'm going to take a guess. If you back this and you're looking at getting all 3 books, say in PDF, you should be able to get Quintessence and Factions, I would assume, when the campaign ends. So there is that. Of course, obviously enough, I will have much more information about the Kickstarter itself once it goes live. Of course, you can go visit thegaminggang.com for the news pieces as well. So I've got to say, checking out the first 2 books as well as the adventure kind of quick start that I was talking about, Amethyst 5e is a very, very impressive setting. If you have any interest at all in including some science fiction with your fantasy, this is definitely a must own, in my opinion. Of course, like most really good source books, there's also a lot of content that you can just kind of pick and choose. You don't have to take the whole setting if you don't want to. You could easily just utilize the high-tech rules or the high-tech classes and backgrounds if you want, or just use new monsters, what have you. There is loads and loads available for you as well. I'm super interested to find out what Revelations will contain, and if the previous releases are any indication, it is going to be some top-notch work and be an excellent addition to your 5e lineup. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding the bell. It will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this Kickstarter preview, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. gmail.com. Of course, thank you so much for taking time out to watch this video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel by clicking right here. Check out the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, or find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks for watching.